let's talk more about what I was using with the supply changing and the demand changing. I'm going to show you how to draw that, and then also show you more about what we're looking at before and after in terms of price changes and quantity changes. So it is a 4-step process, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to draw a demand curve and a supply curve. So just demand, supply, price, quantity. Okay, that's the first thing you got to do. The next thing is I'm going to give you an economic change, right, such as more income, higher taxes, things like that. So now you got to look at it, okay, because of this economic change, does this change demand or supply? From there, you got to figure out, does this change the curve to the right or to the left? From there, you can just draw the new curve, right? More demand, higher demand, so more, so you shift to the right. Less supply, less, lower to the left, so you shift the supply curve to the left. Once you draw the new curve, you find the new equilibrium, so right here, we change the demand or supply, you have to find that new intersection, okay? You identify the new equilibrium and then compare it to the old to figure out what happens to price and quantity, okay? So in general, whenever we see a decrease in demand, this is what we're looking for. You see how supply stays the same, and then we have D1 and D2. D2 you can see is lower. We shifted the demand to the left because it was demanding less. So comparing the old and the new, you can see that prices are lower and quantity is lower as well. Right? Some students get confused about the quantity real quick, so I wanted to show you what we're talking about there. So let's say this quantity was 50 t-shirts, but because there's less income or less, or the price of a substitute changes or there's less population, we are now only buying 40 t-shirts, so now it's lower, right? So it's left to the less. It's to the left because it's less. If we see an increase in demand, in general, we're going to see higher prices and a higher quantity. Okay, so right here, because we have D1 and then we have more demand, we're going to shift to the right. So now we have higher prices and a higher quantity. Again, thinking about the quantity, because you have more demand, your first instinct is to say quantity is lower. But again, think about it. The market is working towards equilibrium. There's more demand. People are buying more. Quantity is higher, right? So that's what you got to be thinking about whenever you see an increase in demand. In general, we will see higher prices because people are buying more. They're willing to pay the higher prices, and also they're trying to buy more, so quantity is higher as well. Okay? On the supply side, whenever we see a decrease in supply, so lower supply, that means we're going to the left. We're not shifting down, okay? We're shifting to the left. And by doing this, we will see an increase in price and a decrease in quantity. So going from our original S1D D1, we're now having a decrease in supply, so now we are here on this new supply. So now we can see higher prices and a lower quantity. An example of this, the price of milk is higher, so the cost of production is higher. A firm will raise prices and have to decrease quantity because they have less milk. Okay? Higher prices, lower quantity. An increase in supply will have lower prices and a higher quantity. So we'll shift supply to the right, showing us that we're going from here to here. We will have lower prices but a higher quantity. The supply is a little bit easier in the sense of, like, think of the supply of diamonds. If there's a lower supply of diamonds, the quantity is lower because there's less of them, and the price is higher because there are less of them. They're more rare, so the higher price. But if there was a bigger supply of diamonds, we would see a lower price, right? Because there's more of them. So this is what we're looking at in terms of changes to the equilibrium. So I'm going to summarize what we just talked about right here. Okay. So whenever we have a higher demand, we will see prices higher and the quantity are higher. To make this easy, look, up, 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 up. If the demand was lower, lower prices and lower quantity. Down, 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 down. Supply is higher, there are more diamonds out there, so they're cheaper because there are more of them. And if there were less diamonds, they're more rare, so they're higher prices because there's less of them. Okay, so this is what we're looking at in terms of price and quantity because of a change in demand or supply. And again, notice here, a change in one curve does not change the other. A change in one curve causes a movement on the other. So that's what we're looking at. So let's look at some examples real quick. Good weather conditions for the salmon market. So let's do our analysis. We will do step 1, which is drawing demand and supply. We'll draw P1 and Q1. Since it's good weather for the salmon market, maybe they can go out and fish more, so higher supply. Higher supply means there's more, so we'll shift it to the right. And now we have a new equilibrium right here, P2 and Q2. So we can show us that we have lower prices at a higher quantity. Okay? And that's how we show an increase in supply. So this is what you're going to have to do on your assignment, is showing a change in the market and how that changes supply and demand. Here's another thing. This one's interesting. In the coffee world, they're always coming out with some new flavor. So let's say there's an introduction of a new strawberry co-fermented coffee. These are really interesting. If you ever get the chance to try one of these co-fermentation processes, it's naturally kind of flavored coffee where they take strawberries and coffee beans and ferment them together, and it's a really cool deal if you're a coffee geek. But anyways, because of this introduction of the new deal, this is going to increase the demand for coffee. People want to try more of it. So we would see an increase in the demand. And so if we're going to draw that on a market graph, we have our demand, supply, price, and quantity. And so we would show an increase in the demand, D2. We'll call this P2 and Q2. So as you can see, prices are higher and the quantity is higher as well. Again, same thing we talked about, up, up, up. The next thing, we have two things going on. Okay, on this one, we see there's an increase in the postal workers' wages, as well as a decrease in the price of using UPS or FedEx. And now, what does this do to the Postal Service? So, we have to take this both one at a time. So, the first thing we'll look at is, what does this change in the wages do for the Postal Service? So, they have to pay their workers more, so maybe they have less workers because they can't afford as many workers anymore because the wages are higher. They now have less workers, less people driving, lower supply. And then because there is a decrease in the price of using UPS or FedEx, well, more people are going to use UPS and FedEx and not the Postal Service. So because the price of a substitute is now cheaper, the demand for the Postal Service is now lower. We have two shifts going on here. All right, so let's draw both of those happening. So price, quantity, demand, supply. Alrighty. So we have D1 and S1, P1 and Q1. So we saw the decrease in supply because of the wages, and then we saw a decrease in the demand because of the lower prices for FedEx. And so now we have a new equilibrium right here. And as you can see, it looks like it's the same as P1, but the quantity is lower. All right. Now, the thing is that, yes, this is true for how I drew it, but I can also draw this a different way. That's P1, Q1, oh, Q1. But now let's shift supply over here and the demand right here. So now I have an equilibrium where my prices are higher and the quantity is lower. All right? I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing a lower supply and lower demand, but now prices are higher. There is one more way I can draw this, where I have demand and supply, where now I draw a decrease in demand and a decrease in supply, and now our prices are here and our quantities here. On this one, you can see my prices are lower and my quantities lower. So I'm having three different options in terms of drawing this. Now, what is the same with all these? Quantity is lower, quantity is lower, and quantity is lower. So what we'll see here, whenever we have a decrease in supply and a decrease in demand, the quantity is lower. So that's for certain. Like, we definitely know if we have a decrease in supply and decrease in demand, quantity is lower. Now, what about prices? Prices were the same, prices were higher, prices were lower. So price is what we would say is uncertain. You do not know what's going to happen to price unless you draw it, right? So let's look at that real quick. Because we have a lower supply, that's higher prices. Because it's a lower demand, that's lower prices. See right here, higher, lower. I don't know what's happening. Price is uncertain. A key thing to remember here is that whenever you have two shifts, something is uncertain. And you're going to use these arrows right here to help you out. For example, if I had an increase in demand and an increase in supply, let's figure out what's uncertain. So, increase in demand, higher prices, higher quantity. Increase in supply, lower prices, higher quantity. Right here, higher quantity, higher quantity. We definitely know quantity is higher. But prices, higher demand, higher prices, higher supply, lower prices, price is uncertain. So use the arrows to your advantage to figure out what is uncertain whenever you have two shifts. Whenever two shifts happen, something is uncertain. So if we saw a increase in demand and a decrease in supply, all right, guess what? We're going to have higher prices for both. Whoa. Higher prices for both. Right here, higher prices, but then quantity is higher and lower. So in this case, quantity will be uncertain. So whenever you're confused, just draw the arrows and that'll show you what is uncertain. But it is a four-step process to figure out what happens. Draw the supply and demand. Draw the curve, demand or supply, shifting right or left, and then figure out the new equilibrium. All right. Next, we'll talk about price controls. All right.